Why is comic relief still a thing that they do in movies? Why do they always have an annoying sidekick or someone who just has to make a joke in the middle of a serious scene? Hi, I'm Harri, and lately I've been making videos dismantling and making fun of movie tropes. But this time we're doing something a little different. As a person who makes jokes at the worst time, I'm going to defend the trope of comic relief. Hear me out.
I just know stuff.
The most unrealistic thing in movies isn't the superpowers or the aliens, it's how seriously everyone takes everything. You can have a guy flying in a metal suit shooting lasers out of his hands and we'll go, yeah, sure, of course, fine. But if the guy cracks a joke at the wrong moment, everybody starts complaining about tonal whiplash. But real life is full of tonal whiplash. 1 minute you're discussing cancer treatment and the next your dad makes a terrible pun about it. Now, often when people say comic relief, they mean the type of character. The designated funny one, the sidekick, the mascot, the one who walks into a tense scene like, everybody stay calm, I got gags. And that's where it gets divisive, because the moment making stupid, childish butt jokes becomes the entire character description, it gets corny. In real life, of course, some people are funnier than others, but I said but humor leaks out of whoever is under pressure. Sometimes the role of the funny one rotates depending on who is the closest to going Kramer. That's why every nurse on this planet has a darker sense of humor than a rejected Batman villain. When movies outsource comic relief to one person, it can be really hit or miss. Sometimes it works, for example, when the character has enough emotional damage for it to make sense for them to be like that, like Rocket Raccoon or Tyrion Lannister, or even Chandler Bing. Or if they simply serve another purpose in the story besides the slapstick. For example, Donkey provides Shrek with the friend he needs, even if he doesn't want one. And he's helpful within the story, because Donkey got game. That's the difference between C-3PO and Jar Jar. I mean the helpfulness, not the game. Neither of them have game. R2-D2 Fox though. But there is a reason why the other characters lug C-3PO's silly ass around, but there's nothing that justifies all the in-story goodwill toward Jar Jar. If the only reason a character exists is to be funny, they start bending the scene around them, like big emotional moments get reduced to setups for the jokes. But comic relief doesn't just mean a character like that. The term covers any humor in an otherwise more serious movie. And often if you take the humor out, even if it seems out of place at first glance,
My wife used to fart when she was nervous.
the scene doesn't necessarily gain more gravitas. It might just become slightly embarrassing. Like everyone's just trying to win the Oscar for best forehead acting. Because in real life, people absolutely make jokes at the worst possible moments. People say Marvel ruins tension with quips, but British people survived World War II almost entirely on sarcasm. Sarcasm and whatever the fuck jelly deals are. Anytime there's any devastating news, half the internet will think this would be an incredible time for an insensitive one-liner. I've heard jokes at funerals. I've made jokes at funerals. Hell, I hope one of my comedian friends does at least a tight 5 at mine. And unless I can get the guerrilla version of a Viking funeral where they stick me on one of Jeff Bezos' yachts and napalm the shit out of it, it's going to be a cremation. So in either case, a roast is more than appropriate. People joke in hospitals, people joke in war, and at concentration camps. Humans aren't very dignified creatures. It's very human to lighten the mood when the situation is the worst. Literally making light of the dark. There's actual gallows humor. It's not just a phrase someone came up with. It's a thing people actually do when they are as close to death as you can get, on death row. Apparently, a guy named James French, the day before his execution, he suggested this headline: French fries. That's not a Marvel quip. That's a real human being. A bad guy, but still a human being, about to die and going, hang on, I've got a good one. So if anything, the worse the situation is, the more likely people are to joke. It's not unrealistic, it's how we really are. Movie critics like to think emotional intensity is this sacred thing that must never be interrupted. But meanwhile, in the real world, someone's dad will crack a joke during his heart attack. A movie without any comic relief starts feeling like LinkedIn. Everyone's just speaking in these perfect, polished, inspirational sentences while they should be having a Britney breakdown about everything that just happened to them. Sometimes it feels like the character making the joke is the only one actually absorbing what's happening. Real people freak out and use coping mechanisms. They don't find out vampires are real and react like they've found out their Uber Eats is running a little late. Actually, most people would probably have a pretty strong reaction to that. And yet, when a character does that in a movie, people go, "Ugh, this ruins the tension." That's the point. A part of it is that stories don't just tell a story. They also need to control how you experience it. If a scene is intense, the movie wants you to feel that intensity. It wants you locked in, focused, and emotionally committed. But there's a limit to how much of that people can take in one go. If a movie pushes too hard for too long, you don't get more invested. You start pulling away. You start noticing the acting and the music and the actor that's a little bit too famous for such an insignificant role, so he's probably the murderer. You become aware that this is a constructed thing, and now the spell is gone. Constant seriousness doesn't feel like reality. It feels like a performance. Just look around. The world is going to hell, and how are we responding to it? By making memes. Real people don't maintain tone. They say dumb things. They laugh at the wrong time. They try to keep it together and fail, or they make a joke that doesn't land and now it's even more awkward. When characters don't do any of that, they stop feeling like people and they start feeling like actors who were told, "This scene is really important," and now they're doing their absolute best to deliver importance. So now you got a paradox. If you follow real human behavior too closely, it can break the tone. But if you smooth it out into pure seriousness, it stops feeling human. Comic relief is the thing that navigates that. It's not really even entirely about comedy, it's about having a pressure valve. It's like when you're making beans in a pressure pot. You gotta let the air out at some point or you will have to renovate your kitchen. A serious scene builds emotional pressure, and if you don't release that pressure at all, the audience doesn't stay locked in. They start to disengage because caring at that level continuously is exhausting. But this is where it often goes wrong, because bad comic relief does it at the wrong time. Instead of releasing pressure after it builds, it interrupts it before anything has had time to land. You get a serious moment, but before it can hit, someone cracks a joke like the movie's embarrassed of its own emotion. That's when people get annoyed. Not because there was a joke, but because the joke replaced something instead of supporting something. A movie or any story has one job: to entertain. And annoying is the opposite of entertaining, so any annoying moment or character quite literally depreciates the value you get for the price of your movie ticket. A bad comic relief moment feels like a YouTube ad read in the middle of a high-stakes car chase scene. This video is sponsored by my comedy special. It's 40 minutes of tightly packed stand-up comedy for only €5. Link in the description. The problem really isn't the trope, it's the timing. Comedy is all about timing, and that's why it's hard. Not everyone has it, and not everyone gets it. And it's deeply personal. That's why when you make the dark joke at the funeral, your mom will punch you in the arm, but your aunt laughs despite herself. I'm a stand-up comedian, so I know how easy it is to mess up a joke with tiny details. But if you'd like to see me not fuck it up for 40 minutes and support this currently unmonetized YouTube channel, you can pick up my special for €5 from the link in the description.
It'll tell you something about the Finnish drinking culture. When I was a teenager, I was watching all of those American movies where they always rob a liquor store. Took me like 2 years to figure out they're actually robbing them for money.
Too little comedy and the movie feels heavy and fake. Too much and the movie feels like a spoof of the genre you're trying to be. You wouldn't put a musical scene in an action movie, so why would you put a cartoon snowman in a movie about fear and isolation? The sweet spot is very narrow, which is why it's so easy to mess it up. For the viewer, fully committing to a story is a bit of a risk. You're choosing to care about fictional people in a fictional situation. And if the movie doesn't deliver, you feel a bit stupid for buying in that hard. So that's why people stay a little bit detached, a little ironic, a little bit ready to go, yeah, I knew it was gonna suck. Comic relief builds that detachment into the movie itself. It's like the movie saying like, hey, we know this is a bit much.
That is one big pile of shit.
And counterintuitively, that makes people more willing to take it seriously, because now it feels safer to engage. In real life, humor shows up exactly when things get uncomfortable, not because it's appropriate, but because it serves a function. It lets you stay in a situation without melting down. Maybe the action hero drops the terrible pun after dropping the henchman off a roof, not because he's a cool badass, but because he feels horrible inside about taking the life of a fellow human who was just trying to put his daughter through college and Sauron was the only one hiring. So yeah, sometimes comic relief is badly written. Sometimes it's forced or mistimed or just not funny. Sometimes the tone of the comic relief is too far from the rest of the movie. You wouldn't put a naked gun gag in Godfather. So why is there an obnoxious fucking snowman in a movie about otherness and self-acceptance? But the instinct behind using comic relief is not lazy writing. It's actually one of the more realistic things movies do. The most unrealistic version of any story is not the one with jokes and serious moments. It's the one where nobody ever breaks and no one says anything even slightly wrong or stupid or annoying. The instinct itself is correct. Humans don't stay serious when things get serious. And stories that forget that don't feel any more mature for it. They just feel less human. And once you understand that, a lot of those annoying jokes start looking a little different. They're not always there because they're funny. They're there because that's what we people actually do. And we don't always do it with perfect joke crafting or perfect timing either.
Bloody hell, bloody hell.
So go easy on the superhero movies. They're about grown-ass men in spandex, for Pete's sake. None of it is real. Now, I know a YouTuber asking you to like and smash that subscribe button is basically a trope on its own at this point, but a call to action is another trope that works, so here we are. And calling a small motion of your finger smashing a button actually is another form of comic relief, because it is a tense moment for a human to ask strangers for something. So if you like this, brutally assault the button. It helps more than you think and it doesn't cost you anything. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.